Um, Hi guys, this is Helen. It's 12:04, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I also love hearing the chatter about the loans, and it's so great to hear that some of you are getting them. Good luck with all of that. If you haven't seen, we do have some resources on our website about actually getting those. Maybe Matthew can share those in the chat so that you can take a look if you haven't gotten them yet or haven't applied yet. I am going to start by just saying welcome. This is FreeWill's Arts and Culture Fundraising webinar. It's actually a meeting format. As you can see, you can click through and see lots of other faces joining us. We wanted to make this a discussion and a conversation more than just a presentation. And we did this specifically for arts and culture organizations, although I think we have lots of types of organizations actually joining us, because you guys are facing a particular tough spot with museum closures, performances canceled, and things like that. And so wanted to bring together some folks in the field and all of you to really have a conversation about that. Who am I? My name's Helen Lynch. I am a partnerships lead at FreeWill. And I actually come from a fundraising background, just like all of you. I was a fundraiser for 11 years, most recently running a program and serving as a director of development for Venture for America, which is a small entrepreneurship organization. And I also worked for the ACLU in the national office. I did lots of things there, but as I left, I was running some stewardship for major donors. And I also am really excited about performing arts and culture here because I was a music major, a voice performance major. So this is a particularly fun area for me. But in order to get us kicked off, wanted to set up some ground rules. The recordings and slides will certainly be sent around after the event. We'll try to get it today. If it's not today, it'll be soon after. Right now, everyone has been muted, and we do invite you to join by video. You may hear my toddler in the background racing his cars around the hallway or laughing. So we welcome everyone to have, whatever is happening in your life, bring it here. It's all real. Partners, pets, children. This is all weird, so let's just all let it be weird. Put your questions in the chat box. We'll do a conversation with two wonderful women, Alison, Bowman, and Courtenay Lewandowski, who I'll introduce in a few moments, and we'll have them answer our questions toward the end. So as you have questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll be tracking those, and we'll read some of them out toward the end. And please stick around for that, and then also please fill out our survey at the end. We'll be putting that link in the chat as well toward the end. But your feedback is really important to helping us improve on these things. And if we do another one, which we hope we'll be able to do, you can let us know your interest in being invited to that next one as well. Okay, so the way we'll talk today is a lot of you filled out a survey, so we're going to report back on that survey to report on how people are feeling, and then the fireside chat conversation with Alison Bowman and Courtenay Lewandowski, and then again that open Q&A with some resources and next steps provided at the end. I want to first introduce the FreeWill team. I have here Abigail Ettelman, who is from the Brooklyn Museum, but also on our team. Abigail, do you want to say a brief word about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Abigail Ettelman, and as Helen just mentioned, I was lucky enough to be the Senior Development Officer at the Brooklyn Museum before I came to FreeWill to work on our Partner Success team. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and really looking forward to hearing from all of you.
And then Savannah Turner.
Hi everyone, I'm Savannah. I'm calling in from Chicago. I work alongside Abigail on the Partner Success team and just feel really lucky to be able to work with some of our incredible nonprofit partners. And I come to FreeWill after working in the arts education advocacy space. I'm just excited to be here with you.
Great. And then Alison and Courtenay, I'm going to invite you actually to just introduce yourselves briefly. Alison Bowman, as you can see, is from the Fine Arts Museums in San Francisco. Would you tell us a little about yourself, Alison?
Yes, I am the first director of legacy giving at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, which is two museums. It's the de Young and the Legion of Honor. So that's exciting. I came on board to sort of build a program from the ground up. Previously, I was a senior major gift officer at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and before that at the Denver Art Museum. So, and then the other piece of my background is I was a practicing lawyer for a number of years at a large national firm. So getting into plan giving is an interesting bringing together of both my arts background and my legal background.
Great. And Courtenay, we'd love to hear from you too.
Hi guys, my name's Courtenay Lewandowski. I've been with the South Carolina Aquarium for about 6 years. I came down to South Carolina from New York, which is where I lived for about 15 years. I worked for Lincoln Center, and I've always been kind of on the nonprofit strategy side. So I love fundraising. It's a great passion of mine. I tend to take on lead roles in long-range strategic planning. So it's kind of my career trajectory is typically sort of a marriage of what are we going to do and then how are we going to fund it. And then I also have a sort of a crisis management element to my work, which of course has been cast into sharp relief really recently. But and I don't know if there are any other aquariums on the call. I do come from an arts background. Obviously, they're very closely related, but hopefully we'll get into some areas where there are some unusual idiosyncrasies today.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your time today and being here with us. As you can see, these two ladies have a lot of wonderful experience to share with us, and we're grateful. I also want to call out two other thank yous, Constance and Matthew on our team at FreeWill, who really helped us make sure just everything happened today and was up and running smoothly. So thank you to you guys. I want to also share those survey results. How are you guys feeling? So you guys answered several questions. The first one we'll address is how are you feeling about working from home? 53% of you are feeling anxious. You know, we all have our days of anxiety, lonely and isolated, energized, confused. There is a whole range of feelings happening here. And we really wanted to put this up here just to let you know that this is all normal. Wherever you are is okay. Even after we're wrapping up week 4 here we're based in New York City. So this is a complicated time. Some other things that you shared with us, though, is that 94% of you are actually seeking strategies and tactics from peers. And we do want to give you some of those things today. 75% of you have canceled or expect to cancel major fundraising events, which is a huge blow. And many of you are also looking for creative ways to replace and cancel those events. And so we'll talk about some of those things in some ways today. And then if we don't cover enough, then you can ask more questions about that at the end. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Abigail and let her lead the conversation with Alison and Courtenay.
Thank you so much, Helen. First, I just wanted to say as well, a huge thank you to Alison and Courtenay. We're so excited for this conversation. It's going to be really exciting. But before we get going into the exact questions, I would love for both of you to share just a quick overview of your organization's size and budget. That does tend to influence a lot of what we do in the fundraising world. So I think it's really helpful to orient our listeners. Alison, would you care to go first?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the Fine Arts Museums are two institutions that came together in the 70s. So we are an encyclopedic institution in that we have everything from ancient American art to contemporary art. We get roughly 1.4 million visitors a year, and we are really lucky to have a very large membership base. So year to year, we have over 100,000 member households, and many of those, probably 40,000 to 50,000, are senior members, which is something that feeds into our whole plan giving strategy. Our members are very loyal because both museums are old. We just had our 100th anniversary of the De Young. 125th anniversary of the De Young, excuse me. And so people have a lot of very nostalgic memories. So that's the size of our institution. Our budget's roughly $65 to $67 million a year, staff under 500, and about 30% of our revenue is contributed.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Courtenay, what about the aquarium?
So the aquarium's we're approaching our 20th anniversary, actually in a couple of weeks. And we have about a $12.5 million budget. About 80% of our operations are covered by earned revenues, so by the gate and by related kind of per caps. And the balance of that has to be covered by fundraising. So our fundraising team typically raises anywhere between $3 and $6 million a year, just based on kind of what new projects we have coming in the pipeline, what new exhibits, what new capital projects we're trying to launch. We have about 120 full-time employees, and then seasonally we add people, in the summer months because families are coming into the aquarium at a much, much higher rate. And we have kind of a feast and famine model, frankly, because in those kind of fall and winter months when kids are in school and families aren't coming in a ton, our earned revenues drop considerably, basically between, I would say, September and February, and then they pick up powerfully March through August, which means that it's kind of a seasonal lift as it relates to our fundraising team. Our fundraising team has, we have about 8 people on our team. We're actually understaffed right now. We're looking for a couple of positions, but we have a really powerful individual giving program. We have about 10,000 members, and members mean something a little bit different at the Aquarium. It's more of that kind of season pass model, along with, you know, special events and special programming. As it relates to donors specifically, there are about 2,000 households where philanthropic gifts are being given in addition to kind of a membership engagement. We're a very, very heavy event organization. So this is certainly dealt a blow to us. Our annual gala brings in, you know, anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 a year. And then we have lots of events throughout the course of the year. So since we are very facility driven, the experience is what drives that kind of ongoing love of the aquarium. So that's generally kind of the landscape for us.
That's incredibly thorough. Thank you both so much for sharing. I think this is going to be really helpful as we dive into exactly what the current New World Order really means for all of us. So thank you both. And with that, I think we can start our questions. Perfect. So this is just a fundamental question that we wanted to kick things off with. As fundraisers, we have to just keep fundraising. And so we'd love to start by hearing just about what strategies your organizations are taking on to keep going in this time. You know, what's worked so far, and maybe if you care to share, what hasn't been as successful. Alison, maybe we can kick things off with you.
Sure. At the Fine Arts Museums, once we pivoted to closure and working off-site at our homes, we went all in on a recovery fund. So our recovery fund has really been the focus both for our major gifts, our corporate strategy, foundations, as well as a membership appeal. And we now have an online recovery fund for the general public to contribute. So we're really shooting for a goal of several $1 million through a recovery fund, and then thinking from that where we're going to go next. But that's been the major focus. Everybody pivoted to that.
That makes perfect sense. Is there anything that you've tried that maybe didn't work out as well? If everything's been successful, that's great.
It's too early to tell. We're just sort of in that place. We've had some very close to the museum donors step up in generous ways, which has been helpful, which has launched the recovery fund. But that public piece and the member piece, those have just gone and are going live. So I think we'll have to wait on see on those. And then just moving into longer term strategies, I think is where we're going to start heading. So it's too soon to say if it's all going to be successful, but we're seeing good signs.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Speaking of long-term strategy, Courtenay, would love to hear what the Aquarium's up to.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, as first I want to say that kind of the key piece of all of this has been sort of taking a moment and giving ourselves permission to solidify the psychology of the team before we took any moves. That's not something you normally do in fundraising, right? Normally you're like, oh, I'm going to throw everything I can at this thing. We got to attack it like day one. And I think one of the things about our organization that's important culturally is that we took pause to check kind of the psychological health of the team and how everyone could sort of be provided with like the support that they needed in order to move forward with their work. So obviously the first thing that tends to work out of the gate is that kind of top of pyramid work. And that's certainly what worked for us. Is we have a very, very powerfully activated fundraising and giving board. We have 39 members. Our board chair is incredibly philanthropic. Our board ends up producing either directly or indirectly about 1/3 of our fundraising goal every year. So it's a really, really engaged board. So starting with those people and saying, hey, can we get creative? Can you present a challenge? Is there a way to make the board kind of the central sort of driving force to inspire the larger donor community. That's really what happened. So we immediately out of the gate had a $300,000 challenge that we presented to the board, and we were able to see about $750,000 come in over a week and a half. So it was a very rapid fire, kind of very successful execution. And actually, I think on this call, I have two of my amazing individual giving people. I saw them pop up. And so that second phase was engaging, again, more of those kind of top of pyramid people that give at that $1,500 to $999 level. And that was an incredibly personalized appeal. It's times like these when you see how well you've done throughout the course of the year to make people your friends authentically. And so I have this incredible gift officer, Brittany Sansever, she's on the call. And she really made it her job to touch base with people, not again from like this fundraising perspective, but hey, let me talk to you as a human. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's how our team is feeling. Talk to me about how your family is doing. And that's it. And then what went out was a very empathetic, very precisely worded and segmented appeal to those people at different levels. And we saw some really great success getting people to front load their gifts. So if you were going to make a gift later in the year, go ahead and make it now. And here are some of the benefits associated with that type of move towards supporting the emergency relief fund, which is what we're calling it. And, you know, to Alison's point, it's like some of the more broad-based approaches, it remains to be seen. We had a couple of fantastic pushes through Facebook, which this was this moment where our development team and our marketing teams, that relationship became so powerfully fused. Because we really had to lean on them to say, hey, open up your channels, open up all of the gateways where you deal with the audience. Because whereas we would normally not ask the audience, we're asking the audience now. Now is the time to actually, you know, get bold about that moment of need. So yeah, so those returns remain to be seen. But what we did see out of the gate was a pretty strong return to the tune of about $30,000 total. Gift average about $100 per person. My team might correct me, but something in that range. So we started to see brand new donors coming in. And so to me, that was the metric, is that people that had never responded to us philanthropically were suddenly willing to help us survive. So rather than that $30,000 figure, right, which is a fraction of what we would be seeing from our larger donors, that means almost more to me, kind of in this moment, because it showed that people that pass through the gates are inspired to facilitate our survival. So
that is such a beautiful summation of how important all of your work is, and on both of your parts. I feel like the emphasis on the very tip top of the pyramid, helping keep everything going in the immediate aftermath, and then also extending out a little bit further into the general public to keep the doors open, metaphorically or literally. So thank you both for that. In the interest of time, we'll just move on to the next question because there's so many interesting, meaty topics. But if anyone has any follow-up questions, we can make sure to focus on pulling those out in the chat afterward, in the Q&A afterwards. So question 2 is, I think, the question that's on everyone's mind right now, honestly. As Helen mentioned, this is a sector that is experiencing extreme challenges through canceled galas, you know, shuttered doors, all of that. So if it comes out to be that all in-person events are canceled this year, you know, you've outlined some of the things that you're doing right now to keep fundraising, but what are other backup plans that you have put into place to sort of continue that connection with donors?
So for us, it was a tough time, as it was for many people. We were launching a new gala format this year that was going to happen, the first one in March, and it had sold out. So that has been postponed, and I think we're all in this place of thinking about whether it could happen in the fall or if it has to be put off for a year. So those conversations are happening. We're lucky that we have gala committees, so we can get feedback from our supporters and our community about what's going to work best in this sort of evolving time period. But that was a blow. And then we were ready to open a Frida Kahlo exhibition that was installed, and it was our ticketed exhibition for the year. So that was ready to open the next week with opening celebrations and public celebrations and lots of tickets sold. And so that's now installed, but we're closed. So that is being pushed back in terms of when it will open. So those were big two blows to revenue. And I think that's causing us to have a lot of conversations about ticket buyers and table buyers for the gala. How do we deal with those revenues, whether they apply to a later event, whether people want to donate those. And so that conversation is happening. As far as our exhibition schedule and ticketed exhibitions, we're hoping that they're just delayed opportunities, but they're big revenue losses.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are there ways in which you and the other fundraisers at the museums are interested, or working to make sure that you still get in front of donors in a authentic way? Without
okay, so that's how are we staying in front of you're kind of freezing. I don't know why that's happening,
sorry.
But in any event, I think you're asking me, how are we getting in front of our donors and our members? So in addition to teeing up a recovery fund, we have launched a museum from home. A lot of content on our website as well as social media platforms. So we've been streaming curator talks, and conservation staff are doing special programs. A lot of things like that are happening live, and increasingly our events team are focusing on how we can tee up live streaming talks with the director for different segments of our audiences. So we're really trying to be out there. In addition, we send out a weekly email with a lot of live links to content, including inspirational things to do at home where you're making your own art. And then the final one I'll mention is we have a very incredible education department that puts out a lot of resources for school teachers, and that's sort of being put out there for families with kids learning from home with a lot of online resources and at-home ideas. So trying to put it out there in the world as much as we can, even though we're closed.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Courtney, what about the aquarium? How are you grappling with all of these challenges?
So, like Alison, we had a gala scheduled for May. So what we actually did was we did a really kind of quick pivot to having conversations with people that had already put down sponsorship or made sponsorship pledges and bought tables, and went ahead and had conversations with them. And we went ahead and quickly picked a new date. And maybe that was bold or presumptuous of us, but we went ahead and picked a date in November so that we all had something that we were working to, so that we could justify asking for people to go ahead and make those payments, those commitments that they had already made. And then we could keep people excited, keep people sort of, kind of energized that that was going to happen. We did that with several different events. We just immediately picked new dates. We picked them all kind of after September, so we could kind of keep that piece going. I've seen a couple of organizations do plan online galas, so I'm really interested to see sort of how that works out. In terms of getting in front of people, I think we're very much aligned with these tactics that are being employed by the San Francisco museums. Our donors are, one of the reasons they're in love with the aquarium is the people. It's the educators, it's the veterinarians, the animal care professionals. And the culture of our organization is always to get those people in front of the donors. So I'm not the one telling the story about why I need a new, endoscope for the turtles. I always bring the animal care professional in with me. So these faces are familiar to them. And so we have been doing these daily broadcasts. Our veterinarians have their masks on and they're, working on turtles. They're doing all of these things, business as usual, because even if our doors are closed, those animals still need feeding and enrichment and care. And kind of the rock stars that are in the building are telling those stories so much better than I would, or our executive director, our CEO would. So that's how we're getting in touch with people every day. And then we have obviously a high percentage of donors that have kids, small children, or their grandchildren. And so those daily broadcasts like nature adventures in your backyard and things like that have enabled us to stay top of mind, I think, for all of these people. And again, working with our marketing and comms team to make sure that donate button is absolutely everywhere. It's kind of almost like a pay what you will interface, because you're like, oh my God, my kid loved that, scavenger hunt today. Here's $10. Because I think as parents, me as a mom, like I have a willingness to pay for that type of content for occupying my kid for a couple of hours. So that has been kind of a new sort of equity space for us in terms of awareness of what we're doing.
That makes perfect sense. I have to believe that after this, when we're allowed to sort of go back out there, everyone's going to be incredibly excited about the opportunity to go to museums, to go to aquariums, to get out into the public, the cultural sector that keeps these important areas alive for us. So thank you both for sharing all of that. I'm just going to keep moving along in our conversation and drill down even further into sort of the fundraising elements of it. Plan giving is obviously an incredibly important area of giving, especially for recession planning. So I'd love to hear how both of your institutions are planning planned giving right now. Alison, since your role focuses so directly on this, I would love to hear from you especially.
So because I am just new in building this plan giving program, it's sort of an interesting moment to be reflective and think about tone. So my first step was really to just try and reach out to as many of our Legacy Society members as I could, to have a personal connection with them and ask them to share their stories about why the museum is meaningful for them without anything more than just that personal connection. We're starting to tee up a newsletter that will go out hopefully in a month to 2 months, hopefully a month, to a section of our senior members that have been committed to the museum over decades. So that's in the works, and I'd really like to make that a little bit more focused on tone and history and the nostalgia parts of our museum, and less on the really technical parts of plan giving. It will be slightly different than sometimes I think plan giving newsletters are, but I think in this moment, we want it to feel really reaffirming about the role of the museum and the place of art in our daily lives, and when we need it in these moments that are stressful. So that's kind of exciting to have the first newsletter go out. I think, like everybody, we struggle with those one-to-one contacts that we used to have at opening galas or opening events for specific exhibitions. So it's harder to reach out to lots of new prospects in this moment. That's the challenge, but definitely trying to continue to keep people thinking about us and understand that we both accept planned gifts, welcome them, and that there's a real need for them if the museum plays an important part in how they want their legacy to be remembered.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for sharing. Courtenay, is there any elements of this that you'd like to respond to regarding the aquarium's plans?
Alison is such an expert on this, so I don't have a ton of wisdom to add. Our planned giving program is very young, and FreeWill was kind of like one of our first forays into getting serious about developing infrastructure for it. I think what's fun to share is that over the past 2 weeks, we've seen 2 new FreeWill planned gifts come in, which has been really exciting to use the platform. I didn't think now would be the time that we would see that. And we had sort of mixed reviews from some of our earliest planned giving communications, people thinking that it was morbid, and this is actual feedback, which I was surprised by. Whereas other more seasoned philanthropists were like, good job, this is great language, way to go. So we're kind of trying to sort of acculturate our donor base to seeing these kinds of communications from us. We've been hesitant because we didn't know how that would land. It's like we're having this, kind of existential threat. Let's talk about your planned gifts, So I think we're in kind of a wait and see pattern, but yet we're seeing encouragement that people are interested in listening to it. So I think as a result of those 2 kind of encouraging contributions, it's very likely that we're going to go ahead and position some of these tools now rather than later. So.
Can I just add one more thought to that? Just in terms of planned giving, I feel like at art museums and places like the Aquarium and cultural institutions, we have to have a slightly different tone than I think a hospital can have in their communications. I think we always need to move back into that place of why do we have meaning in your life? And sometimes that means a little bit softer presentation of that planned giving push. That's my gut feeling about it, having been in museums and doing planned giving throughout my major gift officer roles.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing such like a deep look into what your planned giving planning really looks like right now and the challenges that you're running into. Courtney, I'm not actually that surprised that those gifts came in recently, just because internally, I'm sure everyone's heard us already say this, but we're seeing such huge traffic increases right now on our site. And that just speaks to an interest in estate planning in a way that, you know, as April of 2019, I don't think we would have expected this time this year to be having. So it's a challenging time, and I completely understand exactly the delicacies of it all. But I think it sounds like you're both hitting that mark really well for your communities. So congratulations on that. Given that we have about, just about 10 minutes left of our conversation today, I think I'm just going to move really swiftly on to the next question, which we've already talked about to an extent, about how you've been working to inspire your community and keep them connected to your work. If there's anything either of you would love to, that you didn't get a chance to mention earlier that you think would be really helpful for the other museum, historical societies, aquariums, zoos, different folks on the call, please feel free to share.
The one thing I would say is that one of the real kind of strengths of our strategy in this time, because some of the best ideas about creative engagement are the ones that are coming out of quarters that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. So our conservation team, which kind of mobilizes communities to do, beach sweeps and, communicate about resilience and sea level rise, all of these kind of elements. They worked closely with our marketing team and someone from our advancement team to create something that we're calling solo sweeps. So people are actually doing these cleanups on their own and logging the data that they're finding into our, what we call our litter-free digital journal. And so the idea of kind of crowdsourcing the strategy and thinking, okay, what is the experience that we're normally going to give them when we can all get together? And then how do we flip that on its head and get creative about people doing that in the new landscape? I think that's been kind of key for us. And then we've been able to get a donor in to sponsor that solo sweep challenge. So creating that new inventory based on the kind of creative pivoting of multiple departments, you can monetize it. That's what we've seen.
I love that. Alison, is there anything else that you think would be interesting to share? Or
I think in the interest of time, I think that folded into my communication or talking about how we're reaching out with ways that are authentic to us to make people feel like they're at the museum in their own homes.
I completely agree. As you were saying it earlier, I was like, there we go, there's the answer. All right, well, thank you both so much. We did actually also ask this to the general community on the line today. So I wanted to share a few tips from the general sector. Obviously, there's so many different ways that you've already discussed, but other folks on the line are also, using YouTube to share past exhibitions and interviews with artists with their communities. They're using email videos to highlight what folks are doing at home, whether that's, performing, reading books aloud to deaf ed majors, crafting. There's, that invitation only exclusive experience of building a virtual performance for folks. So, still creating that exclusive experience, but online. And then something I thought was fascinating was also, if you are at an organization that has ever played with doing a workshop or a webinar of your own, this is a great time to do it. Because everyone's at home, not doing very much, or would love to be distracted from the terrible news on NewYorkTimes.com. So these are just 4 ideas. There's so much more. And again, in the interest of time, I'll hand this back over to Helen and Savannah to lead the Q&A. But before I do that, I just wanted to thank you both so much. This has been such a phenomenally transparent and speedy, but also in-depth conversation on what your organizations are doing. So thank you so much for being so willing to share. It's a wild time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Helen and Savannah.
Great, thank you so much. So at this point, if you have questions that you haven't already put in the chat, add them in there. And then Savannah is going to start reading out some of those questions. And we also want to invite you to fill out our survey. So the survey is important because it helps us iterate on this and continue to do better. And it'll allow us to know that you want to be invited to the next one. So please fill out that survey. After the Q&A, I'll also share some resources and further information. And with that, I'll hand it over to Savannah to run the Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen. So we have just over 5 minutes, so just want to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but we'll probably stick around just for a few extra minutes. So let's dive in. If you have other questions, feel free to, again, drop those in the chat. But first, it seems like there are a few questions around the recovery fund. And so Alison, maybe you can sort of start with this, but folks are wondering how you are really positioning the fund in light of so much fundraising for frontline emergency funds that are directly related to COVID-19, and what channels are you using specifically to, get the word out about this fund?
So as I mentioned, it sort of has a number of layers depending on the relationship to the museum. So I would say our director reached out at the very beginning to the trustees and people that are closest to the museums in a very personal way about a recovery fund to help the museum get through this moment when we're all closed and we do not have any of the expected revenue coming in. So I think we're positioning it not, we understand that many social service organizations are really frontline fundraising about the COVID-19 response. For us, we are fundraising around the role of the art museum and how people seek solace and comfort and stimulation and gather as community and as the city's museums, because we are the two museums of San Francisco, the city itself, that we have this very vital role in our community, and we believe that the arts should be here for the future. So I think it's that recovery fund approach around how we sustain, so we're here when we are all able to go back out. So I know it's a tricky thing for arts and cultural institutions when we're competing with such dire need. But for many of us, we believe that there's a place for that, for the people that are closest to us and have the ability to give. So that was the first really effort. And as I said, then we've stepped out to more donors, and we have a much more public facing front about that now. We're online and live. And I'm much like Courtenay was talking about, it's really lovely to see a member just give $25 and write a paragraph about why the museum is really meaningful to them. Yeah. Yesterday we got a whole letter about someone who went on their first date, and it was a picture of them and their now husband in front of a painting, and then they got engaged in front of a painting. So it's nice to see what the museums are in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. All right, Courtenay, it looks like we've got one that is kind of directed towards you and your gala planning. How are you managing gala ticket acknowledgement in terms of tax deductible amount when a future event is still uncertain or going to fall in the following taxable year? Have you thought about that?
Oh gosh. Well, so our rescheduled date is in the current calendar fiscal year, which is a good thing, because it's a great question. Like how exactly would you carry it over? We have made direct contact with everyone who has bought a ticket, so they understand very transparently, like, this is when it's rescheduled. Don't worry, it's coming down the pipeline. Please allow us to direct this giving towards kind of general operating support, and we will be acknowledging at the gala all the folks that were sort of allowing us to translate this into philanthropic operating funds. So that's kind of where we are. It would have been much more challenging if it had been a total cancellation, because that would have been a different conversation, I'd say. Yeah.
Right.
Just one other addition, because I was thinking about sort of like that kind of emergency relief fund kind of phrasing. Mm-hmm. That we got, one of the things that has been working so well for us is that we just got super specific. So we're like, this is the amount of money that's going to pay for medicine for a week. This is the amount. I mean, it's pretty traditional stuff, but it's, you're pivoting from impact to survival. And when you do that, you're like, this is what it's going to cost to feed these 3 turtles for like a month. It's one thing that our team has really kind of excelled at, is just being super precise, every day, honest about what it's going to cost to survive. And that transparency has helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you. What I'd love to hear for both of your perspectives, what tips or recommendations do you have for teams who might be a little bit smaller or just more nimble and not have as many resources?
Oh, wow. We are lucky that we have a large team, including a special events team that can jump in and help get, this recovery fund live on our website. So I think maybe the luxury of being a little bit smaller is sometimes you can move a little faster and pivot when things aren't going exactly like you think they might. Things take a little longer for us to navigate at a larger organization.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it looks like we have 1 more minute left officially. And we've got a question from Maya about virtual theater events and themes. If you want to kind of pop in the chat directly, Maya, if you want to just message me, I can sort of sync you with that person. You can kind of take that offline for now. But any last kind of recommendations or words from both you, Courtenay and Alison, that you want to share with the larger group before we sign off?
I guess I would just say it's been really lovely to see what peer organizations are doing across the country, other types of nonprofits. It's inspiring to see people's creative energy as they tackle something that is really, really hard and challenging. And we certainly are inspired by other organizations and what they're doing as we think about how we serve our community and also are sustained through this really difficult time. So thanks to all of your organizations for being out there and sharing.
Yeah, I think my kind of my final piece would be just offering grace to yourselves right now. That if the money's not flowing like crazy, don't beat yourself up. I mean, this is a time where people are trying to get their bearings as it relates to their families, to their own finances. There's just so much uncertainty, and it's rare to come across the donor that has the liquidity or the infrastructure, the philanthropic infrastructure in place to be able to kind of make these big, bold moves that we're asking them to make. So if it takes a while, my guess is that over the next month or two, there will be some sort of stabilization of major finances, meaning that people will think about their stock portfolios with a little bit more clarity and less like panic. So it may take a little bit of time for some of these tactics to work, even the best ones. So it's all about grace for ourselves and grace for our teams right now.
Thank you, Courtenay. That's a great way, I think, to enter the weekend as well. So I'll hand things over back to you, Helen. Thanks so much for your time.
Yep, and I'm just here to wrap things up and say one more time, thank you to Courtenay and Alison for being here, and thank you to everyone for joining us. We hope that you've identified a few things, or at least gotten your gears turning about things that you could do at your organization similar to what these guys are doing. Please fill out our survey and let us know how we can be helpful through that survey. If you have any further questions at all, you can also take a look at we have this really cool website that is full of resources, all of the webinars we're doing, all of our recordings, templates for making asks, email, phone scripts, all kinds of things on this site. Matthew has shared that in the chat. Please take a look at it. It's literally only there to be helpful to you. So thank you again for being here, and hope to see you guys next time.
Thank you.